suppose there was thousands of people exactly the same as me. So by devious means, I got to the Esplanade because so many streets were closed off with bombing, buildings down and things ready to blow up, etc. And I landed in the first seat in the Esplanade. I couldn't go any further. And behind me, all the smoke and the flames of Greenock were still going on. And all the smoke was over the ships that were in the Clyde that had been using their guns all night. I can see it, yeah, it's clear. And the sun was beginning to shine, just that, beginning to come up that tiny wee bit, dawn was breaking, and the tide was coming in, and the wee birds chirped. And I thought, this is it. That was man's job last night. This is nature's job today. They couldn't take that away. They couldn't stop the tide, nor daylight, nor the wee birds. I've always remembered that. The peace that came with it. Little known we're going to have the same thing the next night.
The sirens once more struck fear into a frightened community. They came again, this time in much greater force. Up to 300 aircraft in 3 waves. All 3 towns suffered death, injury and destruction that night. The first wave dropped incendiary bombs, creating a ring of fire in the sky that could be seen as far away as Glasgow and Arran. As if the enemy's blaze was not enough, the distillery at Ingleston Street unluckily took a direct hit. Now, Greenock was like a burning dartboard with a great central bull's eye. Into this flaming target thundered the next wave. They couldn't and didn't miss. Between the James Watt Dock and Cathcart Street, there was nothing to see but flames. Wave after wave, they came. Firefighters called from as far away as Edinburgh fought to kill the flames, not just to limit damage, but also to make the town a less obvious target. Nor did Hitler respect religious affiliations. St. Lawrence's and St. Andrew's Square churches were both reduced to shells. And 2 of Greenock's famous commercial assets, the sugar refineries of Walkers and Westburn, took direct hits. Much of the old fabric of the town was lost forever on these 2 terrifying nights. As the bombs fell and the fires spread, rescue parties set about their vital task of finding the trapped and the injured. They also found the dying and the dead.
The second night, I think it was the second night, was even worse when we were called out to the incident at the corner of Belleville Street, Lauriston Street and St. Lawrence Street. Where quite a lot of my friends were killed in that particular instance. I'm thinking in the Surgeoner family, the Forbes family, the Malloy, and Mrs. Hope, whom a dear friend of mine, whom I had the unfortunate task of taking her out and putting her in the ambulance, but unfortunately she died that night. But these memories are certainly very strong, and that was a tremendous problem. I think that one of the problems is you lived in your own little community, and we're inclined to forget that in other parts of the town there was equally serious problems and serious disasters. But in these days, especially in the East End, we were very parochial, and you're inclined to think it was the East End that got it all. It did get a great deal. Baxter Street, Brown Street, very, very badly affected, and a lot of very serious injuries. In fact, I know a family where 3 members of the family today are all affected by deafness and have been for many, many years. And it was because of the bombs dropping immediately close to them, where houses destroyed. And it's just now you start thinking about all these little things way back 60 years ago.
They had a big shelter, a tunnel which ran right down under Bouvray. It was similar to being in the subway, and we arranged for us to arrive the next night at a certain time, which we did do. But when we arrived at the mill gate, there were hundreds of people clamouring to get in because they knew that this shelter was there. And at the same time, that a point to note that they had Home Guard actually standing there with fixed bayonets to keep the people back. At the time we were there, we heard the bomb hitting Bouvray above. We could hear the thud, felt the vibration from the explosion, and next morning when we come out and on our way home, we were told that quite a number of people had been killed.
My father decided to take us to the mill shelter, a tunnel affair, like, you know, and my father took us down, my mother and I down, and got us in. And of course at that time there were only children and women children getting in, like, you know, because the raid was on. So my father must have made up to my grandmother's again, and in between that there were quite a few didn't go down, and apparently my father and my Uncle Jim's brother, and my mother's uncle, and quite a few other ones that lived in the close, they were down the stair. There was an old shelter down the back stair, which wasn't fit for people to sit in, but they stood, well, I presume they stood there. A bomb fell in the front of Bouvray, in what they call the front, and of course it blasted all the windows, and apparently the men heard the women and children screaming, and they run out to come up the back stair, and when they run out to come up the back stair, a bomb fell in the back, and they all get blown to pieces, like.
Boys and girls were great chums, and Ollie, he was a boat builder. Actually, he worked for his uncle. It was Head the boat builder, and of course Ollie was not, he was called up and sent back because he was a boat builder. And he and I went to Largs on Sunday, and we had a great day. He had a great sense of fun, and we had a great day, and we laughed and had a right jolly time. Came home, that was Sunday. Then Monday we had the Blitz, and on Tuesday morning I met one of our other boys who was in the Home Guard, and he said, "You hear what happened to Ollie last night?" No. The shelter he was in, it was a direct hit. They never found him. They got some bits that traced him from his sister. And see, things like that happened.
And then they hit the distillery. At that time was producing industrial alcohol. Distillery was at the corner of Ingleson Street and Baker Street, and the molten, you know, the flames and everything was running down Baker Street, and that was setting fire to other things.
But here we couldn't get water. They'd smashed up the mains, you see, and the bones were so bad that we couldn't try and put out yon. We were too small a unit, even though we were the biggest unit, and we got out of it. But we only went to the sugar house. It was up the street a bit.
My father was, he worked in the sugar house in Westburn. He was a shift engineer. And this particular day, he was on the 2 to 10 shift, and he came up onto the roof round about tea time, and he waved over to me. I lived in the attic of the house, and he waved over to me, and he signed that he would see me later over in Dunlop Street. The man that took my father's place was killed because the sugar house got a hit, and my father finished at 10 o'clock, and the guy that came on from 10 till the night shift, he was killed.
And we'd go up and down, there were searchlights, and there was these incendiary bombs falling, and and then the normal type of bomb was falling, and then things seemed to change, and this was when they started dropping these parachute mines. Parachute mines were like big cylinders, and they came down in parachutes, tremendous explosive power, and they were dropping in all over the shop.
A man coming out a plane, and he was coming down slowly, and we said, "Come on, we'll get him," you see. But here, when we got near him, we found out it was a big bomb. So we got out. We got out, and it blew up the dam and all that, you know.
We went to the close mouth again, and we saw this lady running up the street, and you know, they talk about your hair rising up in your head, and she was, you know, really scared out of her wits, and she was screaming, and George and I ran after her and got her. And then eventually, when it quietened down a bit, George and I went up to the house and to see what damage was done, and I said to him, it'd be better. I had a rifle, and I think it was 5 rounds of ammunition. I don't know how many Germans are supposed to shoot with 5 rounds, but anyway. So I went away down the town. We got down to Central Station and went through there and down to Cathcart Street, and that was into, well, on the right hand side, Black's, the sailmaker's place, was on fire, and the pub at the corner of the station bar, which there's pictures of the lamp post there, and that was also where the sugar exchange was, but it's an office, the sugar exchange. And then Cathcart Street itself was a shambles, and the buildings were tumbled, and Cowan's Corner, and it was on fire yet, and the municipal buildings was on fire. You know, fire people, well, it was AFS mainly then, and then these folk who were doing the communications between the headquarters of Civil Defence and people running about, you know, bikes. They were the people who were doing a great job too.
I was on a motorbike. I was glad to be on a motorbike. When you're on a motorbike, you don't hear anything. You didn't hear any bombs coming down anyway. If you heard them, you wouldn't be here today. When the phone lines were down, my job was to deliver messages from the various points, which was Kincaid's or Madeira Street. I was out there all the time during the Blitz. When you delivered a message to Madeira Street depot, and you were up high and you looked down over Greenock, you would think the whole of Greenock was on fire, the amount of fires that was there, you know. After I delivered my message on my way back to the centre, that's the control centre, I come along Rouen Street, and the building at the corner of Dellenburn Street was blitzed, and it was across the road, and I couldn't get by. That was Manning's building. It was called that after because the Manning's pub was underneath it. At the back of that was the chapel at Carnock Street. So the only way I could get by was to go up St Andrews Street, St Andrews Square, along Carnock Street.